The last couple years have been challenging for the world's biggest mobile chip maker. A breakup pushed by activist shareholders, a punishing antitrust investigation in China, topped off by the biggest takeover in the history of the semiconductor industry. But the pivot that our next guest is orchestrating is driven by a couple of key ideas: that everyday objects will continue to go online, and that the automotive industry will continue integrating smartphones into their dashboards. To share what the future holds, please welcome the CEO of Qualcomm, Steve Mollenkopf, with Fortune's Andrew Nuska.
All right. So, Steve, I got a question for you. You're kind of in a fight with a big company called Apple. And I need to understand, you don't look like a bruiser, like a brawler. Why are you in a fight with Apple? What's this all about?
Well, it's pretty well documented, but I'll try to give you a kind of a summary of it. You know, at its core, it's really about the price of IP and kind of what to pay for the technology that essentially Qualcomm and others, but in this case Qualcomm, really produced in order to invent the industry that I think is really become just so disruptive and such an important force in, I think, our daily lives. That's sort of the main theme. So it's really a dispute about the price of IP. But in reality, if you strip it all away, it's really about we have a contract and people want to pay less under the contract, and there's a lot of kind of worldwide maneuvering to try to get that resolved. And you know, in our perspective, it's pretty simple, which is that contract's been in existence for a long time. There's not really anything new going on. And then if you look at the technology that's underlying that IP, it's probably never more relevant than it is today. Yeah. In fact, I would argue every discussion on this stage so far has involved some form of being connected with low-power computing and things that Qualcomm, I think, does at the ecosystem level. So I think the thing will work out, and we'll move on to kind of greener pastures, I think, as an industry, and certainly together as two companies.
So we're going to get along, is that what you're saying? Because I was going to ask you, why can't we just get along? Why all the litigation? You know, I wanted to ask you about that. The IP situation, which with regard to your industry, is fascinating. As you said, so many companies rely on each other's IP to produce their work, right? I mean, the average phone, I don't know, how many patents would you say is in the average phone? Like, you know,
thousands.
Thousands, right? So many companies get a piece of that, right? So how do you navigate that when your contract is you know, restrictive? How do you navigate what's good for your business versus the interconnectedness of this category?
Well, I think it's important to remember kind of how the business is organized, essentially, and what Qualcomm does. What Qualcomm does is it tries to invent kind of the core fundamental technologies that allow the industry to grow, oftentimes a decade or more ahead of when the industry wants it. So, for example, if you went back in the late 90s, we were working on technologies to try to put a low-power connected computer in your pocket. People thought those technologies were not going to be important. They're obviously very important. The history sort of is quite clear there. Today, we're working on technology which we think makes connectivity and computing even more prevalent and more important to more industries. So today, if you look at the discussion about 5G, it's really about, hey, how can I scale the cellular roadmap so that it works for, let's say, connected cars, or works for a mobile delivery of video, or connected healthcare, or, you know, go down the list. Sure. Almost every major industry is being disrupted by the roadmap of cellular. And so what Qualcomm does, the way our business model works, is we try to invent, along with partners, the technology that enables that to happen, make the industry grow, and then share it with the industry through our licensing program. So we think you're better off, you have a better business if you can grow the pie and enable the ecosystem to have as many participants as possible. And that's essentially what we've been doing for 30 years, and it's more true today than it was back then.
So help me here. What's Apple getting on about then? If that sounds very generous.
Well, I think at the end, it's really about the price you pay in order for those things. And this is not a new type of battle for Qualcomm. We had a similar battle in the 2000s time frame.
Sure.
And we resolved that, and this will be no different. Those things tend to get resolved out of court, and there's no reason why I wouldn't expect that to be the case here, although I don't have an announcement or anything, so please don't ask. But that's really the way that it works. For Qualcomm, the majority of the people really work on how do you invent technologies that can be deployed at scale, that can create new ecosystems that allow new industries to exist.
Yeah. That's
really how we try to monetize inventions in Qualcomm.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I just have one more question about the litigation, if you'll. How can you justify all the legal? I mean, so much litigation, you know, in China, here, it seems like an enormous drag on what you're trying to do beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not the one that starts it, so it, you know, we're not really in the position, but we are in a position to defend ourselves.
Sure.
And we think that's very important, not only for us, but also for, I would say, the ecosystem. That's why other people should care about this.
Yeah.
You know, at the end, I'd say we have a very unique business model. It's worth fighting for, and we tend to do that when it's time.
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about some of those technologies, some of those industries, and so forth. So we saw earlier in the program, right, self-driving cars. Pretty obvious that we're going to need chips there. The Mobike fellow was on earlier as well. Says he doesn't need chips.
Yeah.
Steve?
Well, I think the overall theme that you're seeing is that that every industry is trying to figure out is how will that industry be disrupted as the things in that industry get connected to the internet.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just a simple matter of, let's say you have a physical asset like a bike getting connected to the internet. You can do you know, fleet management, and you can create a business model associated with fleet management. You know, if you go back to the phone, it's, you know, very small changes in the ability to provide technology at scale allow new industries to exist. Great example, you know, Uber or even, you know, Instagram.
Sure.
Which essentially is you gave position, location, a camera, low power computing, and the ability to connect to everybody in their pocket at the same time, and it was ubiquitous. New business models exist. And all we really did was put it in one device that everybody carries around. Now, what everyone's trying to figure out is what happens when every device gets connected, what new business models exist. And you're seeing disruption from the likes of big industrial companies like a Siemens or a GE,
sure,
to new industries that haven't existed yet, or, you know, are yet to exist, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that disruption. And what we try to do is make it very, very easy for people to experiment, and so things can fail and go very quickly. So for us, what it's about is, can we provide that technology in an easy way so that the industry can use it very easily? And I think that tends to produce more economic value than trying to use your IP in a kind of, hey, there's a fixed pie, let's try to figure out how much to get out of it.
Sure, sure. Okay, so let's talk about the automotive industry, not just because we had that self-driving car session earlier, but because you're, you know, making very, very serious moves. So $39 billion, did I get the number right?
Correct.
Acquisition of NXP Semiconductors. That's a lot of money, man.
It is.
So what's the goal there? I mean, automotive, clearly a large category, clearly a lot of factors at play, as we heard earlier. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective.
Well, there were a lot of elements of value for our shareholders for that deal, and of course it's still in regulatory approval.
That's right.
Expected to close this year. But if you look at the auto part, what's happening in the car, and you can see that pretty easily, is that there's a real change in the architecture of the car. Mm-hmm. The car architecture is just, it's sort of a once in a career change in the way in which it comes. And some people are betting that the car companies will change, which you probably saw examples of that today, or different bets in that regard. And you have companies like us saying, well, I want to be the at-scale provider of technology to whomever changes the car architecture. And depending on who you talk to, there are a lot of different approaches. But our view was, if we could have the broadest portfolio of technologies that leverage the goodness of mobile, which you should think of as everything's connected, low power computing,
right,
security, graphics, because there's so much work being done in the phone on graphics, video and audio, which is just a tremendous amount of natural language processing that occurs in the car now and in the future.
Sure.
And you put that with all the car pieces you will be in the best position to drive the architecture of the phone through partners. And so that's really what we ended up doing. It's just a portion of the value of that deal. But we think, much like happened in the phone, the car architecture creates a big opportunity for Qualcomm.
Yeah. I was once talking with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, and he was telling me how there are such kind of growing pains, cultural clashes with this shift, because technologists think of cars as, you put it out and you keep working on it, you keep working, right? Continual development. But automakers work toward that final model. It runs off the production line. Good job, boys, we're done. That's a huge change in the way that thinking is being done. So what are you seeing? You have partnerships all throughout this industry.
Well, I would say it's an accurate but maybe simplified version of what's going on in the ecosystem. If you were to bring in the big car companies, they would argue that they're bringing in technology much faster than they did before, but also the constraints of bringing in technology into a car, which has, X number of thousand pounds, is very different than in a smartphone.
Yeah.
And but they all want access to that roadmap.
Yeah.
And so what our view is the easiest part of disrupting the smartphone or the car is actually the high power computing and the connectivity. At least for us, that would be quite easy. The hard part is how do you actually package it in a way that the auto industry can take advantage of it.
Right.
And it's a huge industry that was optimized for different things. Safety, optimized for worldwide scale, optimized for a lot of regulatory that's very peculiar to people that come at it from another industry. So our view was, can we put together both, the best of both worlds, and that led to an acquisition.
Yeah. I'm going to come to the audience with questions in a few minutes. Let's switch industries for a second. Healthcare.
Yep.
A lot of work being done there. We know that from our own Brainstorm Health Conference. What's the big shift? What should we be paying attention to? You can put chips in a lot of things.
Yeah, I think the big issue with healthcare, there's a lot of business model issue, and a number of people in this audience who probably have a very clear understanding, probably clearer than my own. But I think how does Qualcomm view it?
Sure.
We think that healthcare is likely to be more connected, but in order for it to be connected and be meaningful, you have to solve security, you have to solve authentication, you have to solve a number of, I would say, ecosystem big technology issues to allow that industry to grow. Now, if it grows, the improvement in something that is, let's say, mid-teens GDP level, if you can make small improvements in that efficiency, those are huge dollars.
Can you?
I think the issue is probably less technical, with the exception of how do you solve authentication and security, and all the cybersecurity was mentioned earlier. Same issue exists in connected healthcare.
Right.
Those are the type of problems that we like to work on. Those are, I would call them, decade-type problems. And if you solve them, then the industry grows in a big way. And that's what our company tends to try to do. And we wrap a lot of that up into big G transitions. So 3G, 4G, 5G is, I would say, encapsulating a lot of the, I would say, unique aspects of what do we need to add to cellular to make it work in this new industry that wants it very badly. Right. Healthcare being one example, right. Transportation being another.
And chips everywhere. Okay, questions, please. The lights are bright, so all the way over here, yes. Just wait till the mic gets to you, please. Your name and who you're with, don't forget.
I'm Terry Williamson with Koch Industries. Related to the healthcare topic, one of the challenges as a patient in the healthcare, as all of us are patients, is that you don't have your personal health record. And so to drive competition and to keep you from being stuck in one network, all the security, authentication, all of those things are valid, but if we enable individuals to control their own personal health record using technology, then you could go where the best doctors are and you could provide that information. Are you looking to support or do any kind of work in that area to put basically to put the empowerment on the user, on the consumer, so that we can really drive competition in the health industry?
I would say for us, we tend not to play at that level, which is where, kind of what happens to the data and the access to the data. We would tend to play more at the what do we need to add to networks to allow people to solve that problem? It's kind of a separate place in the ecosystem that we tend to operate.
Okay, one over here. Yes, please.
Yes, Michael Miller from PC Magazine and Ziff Brothers. Qualcomm is known as the world's most successful fabless semiconductor company. Obviously, now you're buying a company that operates fabs. Is that a change in your thinking, or is this just something that comes along with the deal?
Well, I think you should think of it as the fabless industry is changing. If you look at the fabless industry today versus what it was 10 years ago, structure is very different, kind of how it plays. And I think the consolidation in the semiconductor industry, I think, means it's very difficult to call yourself one term and sort of be pure to that term. So we do have some fabs coming in as part of the NXP acquisition, and they'll be an important component of the business moving forward, but we'll still have a tremendously large fabless footprint, and that'll grow even faster than that kind of installed base of our fabs.
Fabulous. All right, right here.
Hi, Steve. Zach Kaplan with General Atlantic. There's been a lot of news momentum recently about 5G, companies bidding on spectrum, FTC pronouncements. Qualcomm's doing a lot in that industry. My question is, what is the real, sort of, your opinion, realistic timing of 5G rollout, and what are some sort of practical, realistic consumer use cases, applications that we'll feel and use when it rolls out?
Yeah, you're going to see it in 2019, for sure. You'll probably see some demonstrations earlier that use the moniker, but really 2019 you're going to start to see products worldwide. It's accelerating. A year ago I would have told you a date a year later. And what's driving it is really the distribution of video. If you look at really what's driving the first wave. And I think you're starting to see a real collision course between people providing data wirelessly and people providing it in a wireline format. And I think you're seeing also, at a different level in the ecosystem than us, companies assembling assets to try to play both sides of those depending on where they're coming from it. For us, the demand is actually quite strong. So if I were to look back at how quickly people were pulling us toward 3G or even 4G, 5G, there's two things. You're seeing people push us or pull us there quicker, and you're seeing more industries that you wouldn't expect to be needing 5G pull us there. So for example, connected cars, a huge thirst to try to get them all connected. They have to work without being connected, but they want to be connected as well. And so that's moving quite quickly, and we're pleased to see all the things that you mentioned environmentally with spectrum and work, but it's a real palpable sense of acceleration there.
There you go. 5G powered by cat videos. There you go. Yes, please.
My name's Devin Shane. I'm CEO of Hyperwave Technologies. There's been a lot of hype about IoT. Interested in your thoughts and the value that manufacturers and consumers will derive, and when will they pay for it?
Well, it's interesting. I would have a similar perspective. The only issue is, in our business today, it's actually been a real contributor. We've shipped, I think, something like 1.5 billion IoT devices across a broad spectrum of end use cases. Now, if I looked at what people want you to say about IoT and what's really happening, there's a big gap. So for example, everyone wants to see the IoT use case that leads to the commercial consumer device, much like the smartphone. But that's actually not where the market is. Where the market is industrial applications where people who are saying, how can I, if I got data off of this device, how can I make money off of it? And it ends up, the demand for that is quite strong. What we're seeing is not a lack of demand, but a lack of the ecosystem being able to service such a broad diversity of applications. Actually, one of the reasons why we did an acquisition was to better be able to serve that. But essentially, if you can find an application, aircraft engine data, or anything related to efficiency in the use of electricity, people there's a tremendous thirst for people to get that connected to the internet. That's a real business opportunity that's impacting people today.
Steve, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You were telling me a little bit about this east versus west thing that you're observing, a technological arms race. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I think if you look today, and I'll just talk about, I talked about the different G locations.
Yeah.
So for the cellular folks, that's kind of the big demarcation of when things change. 5G is captured probably more of the government's view than
the U.S. government.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
And the reason is people know that this trend of connecting things to the internet used to be just about phones in your pocket. Now it's about everything, and it's about radically changing industries. And so they want to be a piece of it. Mm-hmm. And they're all trying to position themselves. They might try to position a particular company in a stronger way, or they're trying to figure out how do they get access to partnerships to allow their industry friends to be, to be successful. And I see that more today in 5G than I've seen any other time. And I've been in the industry, since 1994. Sure. So, and I think it's because transportation will be changed a lot. Healthcare will be changed. The cybersecurity of physical infrastructure like, just light poles and everything. It's just going to be, it's so dependent upon what we do in that 5G transition that they want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you think it's really an arms race? Okay, we're in the United States. Should the U.S. be worried about Asia?
This industry is 100% arms race. It always has been. It's always been about innovation. It's always been about first to market. It's always been about delivery of scale. And it's no different moving forward. But I don't think many industries are that different. You want to be the leader when technology changes. And the technology velocity, the rate of change of technology is increasing.
This industry is 100% an arms race. Tweet that. Okay, last question, all the way in the back.
All right, thank you. This is Russell Reeder from OVH. You have such great innovation. How do you keep your team focused? And once they create this great tech and then they want to go build actually that device, but you're like, no, pass it to the sales guys, we're going to go license it. How do you say no so many times to them, keep them motivated?
Yeah, we rarely say no to them. The more motivating fact, because essentially what we tend to do is go out and talk to a lot of partners. So we go talk to people that are going to be using our technology, and we hope as far as a decade in the future. And we're trying to figure out what are the key use cases, and then we try to back into that, what are the key technologies that enable these use cases? And these are industries that don't exist yet, but we can kind of get a sense from talking to people, many of them represented in this room. And so for people that work at Qualcomm, that's a very interesting thing to work on because they know that what they're working on is not only relevant today, but it'll be relevant in 10 years from now. And they get a tremendous amount of satisfaction, for having that input. So they actually don't feel like there's a point in the process where they don't get to play because we don't do an end product. They actually view it as, we have super relevance because of this product. So I don't know, I tend to, our problem is what do we focus on versus, how do we keep people motivated is really the bigger issue for us.
Fantastic. Well, there's a war on. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you.